Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. Well, it's been right around 1 month since the launch of Midnight, which is about what I think is a reasonable point to give my first impressions of the expansion. Spoiler alert, it's alright. Honestly, feels pretty on par with The War Within, having some advantages over it and some disadvantages. Let's dive straight into it though, starting first with the zones. Ever since we got the basic premise back in BlizzCon 2023, I was very apprehensive about Midnight. The very pitch admitted that we were going to be revisiting Quel'Thalas, and while going back to places can often be welcome, it just doesn't get me hyped the way actual new lands do. Fortunately, we did get a decent chunk of said new lands, but with 2 new zones being on their own world servers, things unfortunately feel very disjointed in a way you can't say they have since at least Shadowlands. First up, we have Eversong Woods, which, could we not come up with a slightly different name? It's nitpicky, but I hated how they handled the WoD duplicate zone names, and I hate it here too. But the zone itself is absolutely gorgeous. They really did take the old Eversong and Ghostlands and pretty much mapped it to them 1-to-1. Which kind of works out size-wise, and that familiarity is rather comforting. The biggest differences, of course, are that the Ghostlands aren't really a thing anymore, and even the Dead Scar has mostly healed over, though there are traces of it there if you're actively looking. Probably the only overtly damaged area left is Deathholm, though even that is looking far better off, and it's still a bit gloomy around Windrunner Spire. Further differences are the presence of the light bloom areas, which, although out of place, certainly match the color palette better, as well as the presence of 2 or 3 really big trees that stand out above the rest of the zone. Everything about it is visually majestic, and I have little doubt it would have been my favorite zone of the expansion, and possibly overall, if the original didn't exist. Look, I'm just super attached to that version and its simplicity. I always will be, and I'm okay allowing that nostalgia to elevate it above a probably better version of it. Zul'Aman. First up, my criticisms. You renamed the old raid area to Atalamon, which is good, but you didn't actually rename the dungeon/raid, which is bad. And the geography basically all being downhill to the coast isn't my favorite, but that's it. Everything else about this zone is phenomenal. I love the massive pine trees everywhere. I love the rustic colors they use, from the slightly dark greens to the dark reds and the browns. Those latter 2 really help it avoid being a one-hit wonder. I love the music. It combines the old Zul'Aman music with more soothing vocals to create something that almost feels like out of Nier Automata. Honestly, the average quality of music this expansion might be the highest they've ever hit. And it's stupid, but I even appreciate that there's a northern pass into the zone as well. I always tried to get around the northeastern coast of Old Eversong, but there was an invisible wall, and this really scratched that itch for me. So overall, an absolutely fantastic zone. I was honestly surprised by how much I loved Harrendar. I still get excited every time I need to go there. It's a great concept. We're, well, not at the core of Azeroth, but deep enough that the roots of all the world trees are reaching there despite their disparate locations on the surface. Well, almost all of the world trees. Vordrassil, previously Andrassil, did not get included here, and this is acknowledged by a Harrenir NPC up on the surface. Apparently it's because it was one that got culled and cut off, which I think is really stupid. The whole point of the zone is this is where the world tree roots are, and there are 5 world trees but you're only including 4, and it just feels weird. Anyway, I also really enjoy the cradle of roots hanging above the center of the zone. Even the yellow glow is a unique feature to be appreciated. It is a bit weird that beyond the edges of the zone, it seems to be open space. I suppose there's no reason that the whole Harrendar exists and can't extend further, but I guess some good rocky walls would have helped reinforce that we are underground. Which brings me to the biggest issue I have with the place. It was clearly originally meant to be in The War Within, as evidenced by the data-mined Rootland stuff, Orwena being in the CGI sizzle reel trailer, and the routes in northwestern Ashkahet that clearly could have been a connecting point. We'll have to wait and see how important this change actually was, but on the surface, I assume it was a combination of needing zones for Midnight and to space out zone concepts. Blizz was clearly worried about underground burnout with The War Within, so swapping one out and bringing in Koresh would help alleviate that. But I say screw it. My biggest criticism of The War Within zones was that we never went any deeper, and bringing the expansion full circle by going even further down to this nexus of vitality and primalism and all the world tree roots would have been a banger of an ending, even though I love Koresh in its own right. But, that whole tangent aside, great zone. The music is phenomenal here. I'm sure I'm going to be reusing this joke a ton, but we're basically worshipping Awa while listening to Enya, and it frickin' works. Voidstorm has the unenviable task of being the only non-lush zone we launched with. Instead of a woods or a forest or jungle, it's somewhat fleshy netherstorm. That's not a bad thing by any means, I just don't imagine many people citing Voidstorm as their favorite. It's a hostile environment, and while nice looking, has a certain ugly element to it. But I do really appreciate that this epicenter of void activity does have some biological elements to it. In fact, it looks a lot like an ocean that's been drained out, which is a nice reprieve from the cosmic aspect of the void we've been heavy into lately. I also really dig the void stone architecture that we see around, particularly within the Void Spire. Oh, and Slayer's Rise is a nice shift from the peaks and valleys and gives us just a nice big flat area. Next, there's the Isle of Quel'Danas. What's to say here? They shifted the Isle west to be directly north of Silvermoon, built a bridge, and I guess reworked the buildings? Honestly, there's been very little reason to explore the island itself outside of the intro quests, dungeon, raid, and delve. It's all fine, but there's not much reason to be here otherwise, and like with the original, it doesn't feel unique from Eversong. Alright, but what about the new capital, Silvermoon City? Well, a lot of my thoughts about old and new Eversong Woods can be echoed here. The new Silvermoon City is fantastic. But I just really love the old version, especially with how simple and open it was. The new one is way more fleshed out and gargantuan feeling, even if it does follow the recent trend of stuffing all of the functional areas into a relatively small space. I also feel like they redesigned the layout a bit too much, to the point that you can't always easily map the subsections of the two versions very cleanly. I do love the Horde symbol garden area though, and that the inns, like in the original, have back entrances that sort of shortcut you around the city. The main one even connects to Astalor's Sanctum. There's also the Horde only area, which honestly I hadn't gone to until just before recording this video. I'm glad we got something, but it's ultimately kind of barren and in every way less functional than the central section of the city. All in all, the original probably holds my heart more, but it's still a great city, if a bit vacuous in certain areas. Alright, let's talk about these zone events. In Eversong, we have Salthiril's Soiree, which honestly doesn't even feel like a zone event, it's just weekly quests you do for reputation. Even the defending the runestone part isn't very unique. There's nothing wrong with any of that, it's just not really worth commenting on. Then we have Abundance, which can occur in any zone but is sort of based in Zul'Aman. This is a weird little task that you do 8 times a week to farm currency to buy everything you want off a vendor. I like the concept, and Dun Dun is a fun character. The best way to do it is obviously in a raid group where everything just gets completely broken and insane, while this stupid little mouse Loa is screaming at you about glorious abundance! The only real downside is that you are just doing the same thing for about 24 minutes a week, and that if you want the best professional equipment, you're going to be doing this for quite a few months. Herondar has Legends of the Heronir, which again barely qualifies. It's just a set of weekly side quests that all focus on the Heronir's history. Again, nothing wrong with that, I just don't have much to say about it. Voidstorm's Stormarian defense is probably the only one that feels like a real zone event. Periodically, the area will be attacked by void forces, and you defend it for about 9 minutes. Oh, and you get to set up some tower defense stuff that probably helps, but it's hard to tell. It's an alright activity, but tower defense stuff is just more fun solo. And I got the mount really early, so I have absolutely no reason to go back here anymore, which I'm not upset about. Next, let's talk about Prey. It was originally billed as almost its own game mode that you just turn on and deal with all the time, but that's not really how it plays out at all, especially on Nightmare difficulty, during which you definitely just want to focus on the task to finish it as quickly as you can. And I don't really think it can function as a game mode while it's focused to only one zone at a time. But just because it's not what I imagine it would be, doesn't mean it's bad. It's basically a thing you do for about a half hour every week. It's really not difficult at all, and I guess it gets us a buttload of those plinth decor, which I imagine most people have no use for. So yeah, nothing special, but I kind of enjoy it. Next, let's move on to the campaign, which overall was serviceable. I don't have much to complain about, but I wasn't really wowed either. I feel like Ringing Deeps and Halifal both had more emotional stories, the former actually making me tear up in its climax. None of that here. There are some of the overused WoW tropes, like in Zulamon where we have to go around and get blessings from the 4 different main Loa, but there's nothing really offensive, I suppose. I did appreciate some faction tension at the start, though that seems to get addressed pretty quickly. My biggest gripe, and I know I'm not the only one that has this concern, is that after the Horde being neglected for quite a few years now, we finally go to Quel'Thalas to get an Alliance expansion set in Horde zones. Don't believe me? Well, I ordered the major characters based on prominence. Let's see how far we have to go before we find a Horde one. First, Eretor. Clearly the main character. He's charismatic and likable. Perhaps too likable. He has no character flaws really, other than acting a bit like a whiny teen during his adventure with Alonsis. He's got a lot of the same writing issues as Anduin, but as of yet not the prominence to make me resent his presence in the story as much. But it is kind of weird how by the time of March on Quel'Danas, he's basically leading the army, like, what? Second, we have Ilaria. Yeah, she's still a major player. When she's not the main character, she's at least more bearable. And credit where credit is due, she at least acknowledged that Locust Walker was right. It didn't matter if they could trust Xal'atath or not. It was the necessary course of action to take at the time. Third, Turalyon. I really don't care that Turalyon's moral integrity is being dragged into question. I have no attachment to him, and I appreciate the presence of tension in the story again. But I take umbrage with 2 things. First, having to attempt therapy for him because one person he was close to died. Like 1,000 years ago from his perspective. Get over it, dude. Second, the insane amount of emphasis put on him striking Eretor when he was trying to attack the defeated Zul'Jahn. Because he didn't swing at Eretor. Eretor pulled a Liam Greymane and dove in the way. That's on him. Yeah, he got a little baited and it wasn't very pious of him, but they were just fighting to the death. And I don't appreciate how it keeps being brought up. It's the game telling us how we're supposed to feel about this event, when we should be allowed to draw our own conclusions. Anyway, fourth, we have Umbric. He's kind of boring, but he's the only Void Elf of any importance. I guess I at least remember Maela's name and Lady Darkglen? Anyway, all of his morally questionable decisions are vindicated because, I don't know, because he's Alliance. Fifth, we have Orwena. She's fine, if not particularly exciting to follow. I liked her dynamic with Amarak, particularly with the context of her short story. So far though, she's just been someone blessed to be important and who had to repeat the familiar storyline of working around a repressive governing body. And finally, in 6th place, we finally have a Horde character, Lady Liadrin, who I'm fairly neutral towards. She was okay as a companion piece to Zul'Jara, even if she moved over the millennia-old racial tensions remarkably quickly. There's also Zul'Jara, who is alright, but I don't like how she's just kind of super special awesome and got to be the first Hashe in generations. Maybe I'd mind it less if we weren't poo-pooing all over Zul'Jin's legacy. She does, at least, have the acknowledged character flaw of being too hard on her brother, which has stirred up some of his more questionable choices. Speaking of Zul'Jahn, my opinion on him will ultimately depend on where we go with him. I like the note we left on with him staring at you-know-where from the edge of the sky bridge. I hope he doesn't just get villain-batted and that his alternate views are somewhat validated. There's also Decimus. This guy is just a fun miscreant that loves stirring the pot. His deliberate antagonizing and trolling of Lothraxion was hilarious, and I appreciate the general Dominar mindset of expecting, engaging in, and respecting betrayal and power grabs. A great minor character. As for Lothraxion, he was arguably done really dirty because it's easy to see his point of view as valid if you take out Eretor and Ilaria espousing how wrong he is the whole campaign. He certainly is blinded by rage in the light though, and does do some bad stuff. In the end, he's not that important of a character, so I really didn't mind killing him. Romoth ultimately hasn't served much of a role outside of being a foil and college roommate for Umbric. It's honestly kind of surprising how little he's had to do. Halduran, he is part of the Herondark campaign. That's it. Lorthamar, he's present for the intro quests and the end of Eversong, and he stands in the middle of Silvermoon delegating and goes to talk to people a little bit. Considering he got in the CGI cinematic, he's done surprisingly little. There hasn't really been any development for Xal'atath either. She's really just been doing her usual thing and then disappearing when we actually get the upper hand. But I did really like the reveal that she doesn't actually care about Ilaria and just wanted Laura the whole time. And lastly, there's Alonsis Fowl. He's basically only been in the Liadrin short and the Eretor's quest, but I do appreciate his more informed and nuanced perspectives. He's an alright undead character, even if he isn't Horde. And just touching on the max level campaign before we move on, it's kind of a stupid premise. Like, we are given in-universe reasons why we're specifically looking for help from the elven races, but those reasons are pretty stupid, and it's painfully obvious that Blizz just wanted their reunifying the elven tribes story. Which is dumb. Why would I want the elven tribes to be reunified? And the overwhelming absence of the vast majority of Horde races is just super palpable. Like, you're telling me that Night Elves, the race whose whole identity for the past decade is that they got genocided at Teldrassil, is more capable of fielding an army than orcs. But hey, Chandris can still lecture us about our incessant need to have wells of power, despite 5 out of 5 world trees being either corrupted or targeted for world domination, including the completely unnecessary one they planted 1.5 expansions ago. And the most recent development as of this video, the cinematic at the end of March on Quel'Danas. Spoiler alert! Yeah, logistically it felt really stupid that Sylvanas just pops in, scares Xal'atath off, talks for 2 minutes, and then goes back to the Maw right away. But, I don't care because she and Verisa had a hug and it was adorable. Like, their relationship is one of my favorites in the whole game, and Verisa trying to be mad at her but it being incapable of and just folding and feeling so comfortable embracing her sister. It's adorable. Especially since that's pretty much the only thing Sylvanas accomplished by showing up, was saving her sister and nephew. It's almost enough to make me forget that this is a different character than the one we knew from the Frozen Throne through Shadowlands. Okay, let's circle back to gameplay with the dungeons. Windrunner Spire. Gameplay-wise and aesthetic-wise, I love this place. Really, there's only 2 things that loses points on. The first is that we kill undead worshippers of Sylvanas. I know they're considered extremists or defectors from the Horde or something, but it's still kind of lame. And the big problem is that we're being guided around the whole time by Lirith, easily the worst Windrunner. He's just an Anduin facsimile. And I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like he might be voiced by the same guy even. Though if so, to his credit, it does sound fairly different. Murder Row. This dungeon is really fun. I've only really ran it once, but I appreciate that the part of the city that it takes place in isn't used for much else at all. I don't know if I appreciate how negatively it's depicting the Blood Elves' use of Fel, and the first boss almost feels like it's chastising us for liking that the Blood Elf from the Burning Crusade trailer mana-tapped that worm to death. But I'm overthinking it. Obviously, these guys are supposed to be extremists and opportunists, and the dungeon itself is very fun. By contrast, Magister's Terrace is easily the worst dungeon in the pool. They took the most popular Burning Crusade dungeon, had us run through the second half of it twice, and added like 2 new rooms and a tower at the end. Despite the visual update, it's incredibly lazy. They didn't even give it a distinct name. Oh, and to top it all off, we spend the dungeon working with Umbric to circumvent Romoth. As a Horde player, it didn't feel great. Den of Nalarak. I'd honestly be completely fine with this place if the first 2/3 weren't a dream sequence and in their own area. Though visually, it looks amazing, like a mix of Azure Span and Zulaman. Not my favorite, but not terrible. Mysara Caverns might be one of my favorites. I appreciate it for being a bona fide dungeon that you run through. No stupid gimmicks, and for having an outdoor and indoor section. The Blinding Veil was also fairly enjoyable to me. There are some spots that are kind of tight, but some that are quite spacious. All of the bosses seemed fun or tolerable. I especially like the T-Rex and the Triad bosses. Nexus Point Xenos. While I doubt it'll be one of my favorites, I don't really have any gripes with it either. The layout is a bit uninspired, but you do have some flexibility in routing and in which wing you go after first. And I'm glad we actually do get a bridge to Lothraxion instead of porting over. It looks cool even if it's just general voidy stuff. And Voidscar Arena, I like how it starts, with us essentially underneath the stadium going through these tunnels. But once we get into the arena and then into the more open areas towards the end, it sort of starts to lose me. The raids have all been fun. Like, I enjoy all of the encounters. My favorite is probably Chimeras. Least favorite, probably the Void Dragons. I like that during Ilaria's intermissions, we're basically fighting her inside a toilet bowl. And even though I would appreciate Dream Rift and March on Quel'Danas being a little bit larger, I'm just glad we're not having another raid tier with a single 8 to 9 boss raid. It's been so long. I suppose I should talk about the Heronir. I maintain my general criticism that they aren't what we needed. That is to say, a race that seems to be a mix between our 3rd troll and 5th elven races. They really seem to step on the design themes of night elves. There is a distinction, but it's enough overlap that they'll both detract from each other in future plots, and they just aren't visually unique enough to feel worth the opportunity cost. I honestly would have been more excited by the Rutani. We don't have a playable plant race yet, and they look alien enough that they'd feel special. Obviously, they'd need more lore focus, but yeah. That being said, I don't hate the Harenir in and of themselves. I'll likely change my druid or some other character into one, because they do look nice. I like their wall paintings and the Shulka subculture of having to cut themselves off from Alnhara's song to be able to survive in the Rift of Aln. And, like I hinted earlier, they very much feel lifted from the Na'vi of Avatar. Ultimately, I think the Harenir are neat, but really just Night Elves reimagined. I suppose I should talk about housing. It feels weird too because it's been around for several months now, but the long and short of it is, it's great. I say this as someone who's done basically nothing with their house so far. Look, I have a lot of excuses. I want to wait until it's fully leveled so I don't have to redo stuff, and I want to wait until I have enough decor to do most of the stuff I want to. And some of that costs gold, and I need gold for mounts first. And also I'm busy. And also I'm terrible at interior design and exterior design. But I'm going to get around to it eventually, okay? The add-on changes. I'm kind of mixed on this. I was always in the camp that weak auras were getting way too strong and trivializing a lot of raid encounters. And while I feel like I did adjust fairly well to the changes, there are some things that I just really miss. Mainly visual indicators for procs and buffs reaching certain stack counts, and other things that just made gameplay much smoother. And it's extra frustrating because I don't know if any of those things actually were made impossible by the changes, or if we would still be able to if the Weak Auras guy continued to develop the add-on. I'm not blaming him for not wanting to, but the whole situation is a little bit frustrating. And the last thing I'm going to touch on are class changes, at least for the classes I've played so far. Devourer has been amazing. I love the spec. It's basically Legion Void form, but you're way more mobile. Holy Priest is still pretty fun, but it feels kind of weird not having heal anymore. I'm just very used to having an efficient triage spell as filler. But the one rework that's really been hitting me hard has been what they did to Frost Mage. I have had my Frost Mage since Burning Crusade and mained it since Wrath. They took my favorite whack-a-mole DDR style proc reactive spec and changed it into staring at a debuff stack counter on your target. It is not fun constantly staring at a debuff counter. I in fact hated it so much that for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I switched to Arcane, which has its own issues, but they're far less egregious, I feel. The thing is, Frost is like top 3 DPS right now. I feel like it hasn't performed this good, relatively speaking, since like Heimal, and I'm missing out on it. Did they just really buff its damage so people wouldn't mind playing the awful rework? I'm sorry, I know some people love the rework, and those people are wrong for it. So yeah, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm gonna do. Maybe I'll force myself to get back into Frost, or just start having to do competitive content on a different class entirely. I mean, my damage has been so in the gutter that I've been accidentally doing mechanics more poorly because I'm just so desperate not to be at the very bottom of the meters. And as good as the rest of the expansion may be, when you feel like you're underperforming and being a worse player than everyone else, it can really sap your enjoyment of the game. Oh man, I don't want to add on a downer. Mythic Plus is tuned really generously this season. That's neat. I don't know if it's good, but it's neat. This week's drawing is Eritor because he's pretty much the main character of this expansion, following in the footsteps of his mommy. I already gave my thoughts on his personality. As for his design, it is neat that it's reminiscent of the Judgment armor he was saddled with for so long. That being said, his haircut is really stupid, and his light and dark dragon tattoos are really stupid. And like, dude, you can't get face tattoos, nobody's gonna hire you. I put him in Nexus Point Zenith because I didn't really know where else to put him, and I made sure to add some of Lothraxian's glowing claw marks. That does it for this video though. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next week. Bye-bye.